Namaste. Delhi friends, the wait is almost over. Jayaji is bringing the Wisdom to Win to Kamani Auditorium from Thursday 18th September to Sunday 21st September. Join these four insightful talks on Bhagavad Gita chapter 2 and change the way you see life. Bring along family and friends who would benefit from this knowledge. Click the link in the description box for details. We will not have the webinar next Saturday, 20th September, since Jayaji will be in Delhi. Now, let's continue with chapter 4 of the Bhagavad Gita.
ॐ सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः
Chapter 4 talks about refined action. Chapter 3, which we have just completed, speaks more of the action. Here we are talking more of the motivation behind the action, the intention behind the action, what drives us to action. So, in the world, when we speak of work, what do we associate work with? Why do people work? Paycheck, profit, money, power, prestige. And all of this makes work very boring. It's drudgery, which is why we look forward to the weekend and to vacations. Then when you speak of worship, what do you associate it with? Worship? You don't worship? Huh? What activity do you associate worship with? Prayer, visit to a temple, now with Ganesh Chaturthi, going away from work, not working, going on a pilgrimage. That also is not acceptable, right? You can't be, your concept of worship, you can't be doing that all the time. But when you combine the two, when you combine work and worship, in other words, you work with a worshipful attitude, then life becomes exciting, enthusiastic. You're looking forward to work because then it is enriching, it's fulfilling, it's exciting. Yeah.
How does one, I mean very clear, how does one know that they are not attached to that side or to the worships? And the last time when we spoke, you said you should be getting attached. Now, it really hit me very hard. How does one at that point in time know that yes, the way you said, I'm very enthusiastic about work, I'm looking forward to working, apply all the principles. But still, at times the way you pointed out, I get attached to that. How do you not get attached?
By getting attached to the higher. So his question is, okay, I'm doing my work, I'm excited about it, I'm enthusiastic about it, but I'm attached to it. How do I not get attached? The very fact that you're getting attached to it means that worshipful attitude is not there. That aspect of worship is not there. The thought of God or the higher isn't there. So you have to, how do you get detached from anything? Get attached to something higher. So if when that is shaky or it's not 100% and you're still attached to the lower, then that's where you'll be. You'll find work exciting, energizing, but you get attached. So you have to bring in this worshipful attitude more. So last time we had completed verse 14. We'll continue with 15. For those of you who've come for the first time, we are on chapter 4. Don't worry if you've missed the previous verses. If you don't understand anything, please feel free to stop me and ask. 15. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
When I am sad or some things don't work, that time I try to attain equanimity.
Attain?
Equanimity.
Mm.
But when I am happy, I don't do.
Ah, yes. See, her point is that when things are not going her way and she's sad or disappointed over something, she's able to become equanimous, bring in this philosophy and become equanimous. But when she meets with a joyous state, like maybe your grandchild is born or your son gets married or whatever, she's not able to be more objective. She gets carried away with that joy. Yes, that's true. That's true in everyone's life. That is why we must use sorrowful circumstances to attain that objectivity, so that it lasts when you meet with joyous circumstances. But that's true for everyone. 15.
एवं ज्ञात्वा कृतं कर्म पूर्वैरपि मुमुक्षुभिः कुरु कर्मैव तस्मात् त्वं पूर्वतरं कृतम्.
Knowing thus, even the ancient seekers of moksha, liberation, performed action. Tasmat, therefore, you also perform action as the ancestors did in earlier times. So, in the previous verses, the appeal was only to the head. It was 100% intellectual. Now he's bringing in the emotional aspect. He's appealing to Arjuna's heart. He's appealing to our heart. By saying that knowing thus, knowing what? That Atman is immaculate, untouched, unaffected by anything that's happening in the world. Meanwhile, if you have any other question, I'll be happy to answer. See, in chapter 3, they are also talking about the intention behind it. But they're talking about selfish, unselfish, and selfless to some extent. In chapter 4, the accent has shifted completely to Atman, like in this verse. Knowing thus means you have to understand that you, Atman and its relationship with action. And that you and I are Atman. And nothing in the world affects us. So that kind of thing.
Why do we say that we everything surrender it to Guru?
See, they're two different things. So the advice to us is follow the teachings, not the life of the Guru. Okay, so why is that? Because different people are made differently. Nature is different. Like for instance, all these people achieved realization, but they achieved it using different methods. Sri Ramakrishna lived in a temple. Ramatirtha went lecturing around the world. Vivekananda went lecturing around the world. Buddha left a life of affluence and chose to be monastic, deprived himself. And then there was a Janaka who was a king, and so now, if you happen to have a guru whose nature is different from yours, then what do? If you follow his life, you'll go wrong, right? So what is right for him is not necessarily right for everyone. But if you follow the teachings and then you apply them in your life, using your intellect and deciphering what is the best way forward for you to achieve your spiritual goal, then you can never be wrong. As long as you follow the principles, you can't be wrong. But if you follow the life, you will be wrong somewhere. And number two, we are assuming that he is right, the guru is right in all aspects. May not be. The guru may have made a mistake somewhere. We all make mistakes. So you are following the mistake. But surrender to the guru must be there. See, surrender, if you don't have this aspect of surrender, you can't live in life. When you fall ill, you go to a doctor. If you don't have surrender, means you don't have the belief that, first of all, you know, I don't know. But here is a person who knows and who can help me. So you surrender to the doctor. If you don't have this concept of surrender, then you will be constantly questioning his bona fides. I don't know whether he's going to kill me, or I don't know whether he is doing what he is doing because he wants to make money, or, and nowadays it's become like that. Especially when a doctor asks you, do you have health insurance? Do you have insurance? Straight away you must say no. Because you say yes, you've had it. Now, this is suspicion that comes. And the patient has to protect himself. No? But if you have faith in the doctor, which is built up over a period of time, it's fantastic. Same thing with a lawyer. In any relationship, husband, wife, if you don't have basic faith, how can you live? Surrender is a very important aspect. That's completely different from follow the principles, not the life. You may gain inspiration from his life. Like even in the world, in the field of cricket, a youngster, aspiring batsman may admire Sachin Tendulkar, may admire Virat Kohli, but he can't do everything that they have done. Because he is different. In short, you must use your intellect all the way. So, coming back to verse 15, when he says knowing thus, knowing what? That Atman is immaculate. It empowers you to perform action, to live. See, every muscle that functions in your body, every cell that functions, every movement you make, every emotion that you entertain, every thought that comes to your intellect is all enlivened by Atman. Without Atman, none of this can happen. But Atman has no desire to act. It has no interest in achieving anything. It has no interest in acquiring anything or the result of the action. Nothing. It's unaffected by the result. Whether the result is success or failure, Atman is Atman. So, with this knowledge, it's like gold. Gold is gold. You know that, right? Gold can be mixed with anything else. Gold can be made into a ring, into a bangle, into a beautiful piece of jewelry, or something grotesque and horrible. But the value of gold is still gold. है ना? Now what is the value? 1 lakh per 10 grams. That will remain. Ocean is unaffected. Whether the ocean is calm and serene, or there is a tsunami that is destroying everything in its way, ocean is ocean. Similarly, Atman is Atman. Atman will remain Atman, and that is you. You just don't know it. So once you know it, knowing thus, even the ancient seekers of moksha, our culture goes back into yugas, millions of years. It's not just like 200 years of American history, another 200 years of Australian history, and even that they've messed up. What do you have to say to a culture that has lasted centuries, millions of years? These ancient seekers of moksha, they also performed action. So this is an emotional thing. You feel it, no? Your hair should stand on end when you listen to this, when this idea crosses your mind. So therefore, you also perform, Arjuna. Means he's talking to all of us. We all have our duty to perform. No? Have you ever wondered whether there is war or peace, whether there is a flood or famine, the sun still rises. The sun still shines. It still gives energy and vitality to the earth. It doesn't say, oh, because there's a war, everyone is sorrow stricken, so I will not rise. I am also affected by the sorrow. Yeah, birds sing, rivers give water, clouds give rain, peacocks dance. So also you do your bit. What is your bit? If you are a carpenter, do carpentry. If you are an electrician, do electricity. If you are a homemaker, do what you have to do. You are a business person, you do business. Whatever be your talent, your passion, your place in life, do that to the best of your ability. And don't get affected by what is happening around you. Whether the 50% tariff or 15% tariff, what does it matter to you? When I say that, I don't mean you should be indifferent to it. But you can't do anything about it, yeah? Can you? If you can, do. But what are we doing? Just gossiping about it, stalking. And this negativity affects our minds. So the result is, what little you can do, also you're not doing. If all of us do what we're supposed to do and take up this challenge, fine, one country has imposed 50% tariffs. The whole world is open to us, right? So instead of sitting there crying and gossiping about it, start acting, look at other avenues. You get it. So this positive outlook comes when you understand Atman is like that. So, and I am Atman. So I must also live life like Atman. Unaffected by anything that's happening. No involvement in anything. Completely detachedly. Detachment is a concept that we must learn. That lends beauty to our lives. Like Mark Antony was heartbroken because his dearest friend Julius Caesar was assassinated by not an enemy, a friend. How do you like it if your own friend stabs you in the back? Not enemy. And he expresses his grief, and then he quickly gets back his balance because he understands, I have a mission. I have a role to play. I have a duty. Caesar is dead. There's nothing I can do about it. But at least I can clear his name. And so he goes out there, and for those 10 minutes, what a way he plays his role. Very humbly, he goes and asks permission to speak at Caesar's funeral. Brutus is riding high, so he grants permission. And the second mistake he makes is he leaves the scene, goes away. So no chance of retrieving the whole thing. And Mark Antony starts so innocuously. You all know the story of Julius Caesar, right? So, friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. And so, Brutus is very happy that he's got his way. But, point by point, he takes every point that Brutus has made and smashes it. He asks the crowd, does this in Caesar, 3 times I offered him a crown, all 3 times he refused. Does this in Caesar appear like ambition? No, roars the crowd. And then he says, but Brutus says Caesar was ambitious. But Brutus is an honorable man. And at the end of the 10 minutes, that crowd that was saying, Hail Brutus, now are gunning for Brutus. But his object, Mark Antony understands, I have achieved mission, my mission accomplished. What is his mission? To clear Caesar's name. He doesn't join them. He has no enmity towards Brutus. He says to himself, now let it work. Mischief thou art afoot, take thou what cost thou wilt. You should have the same attitude. Do your best. After that, switch off. And say, same thing. Mischief thou art afoot, take thou what cost thou wilt. Then there is no involvement. There is no attachment to the fruit. Because you've already got the fruit. What is the fruit? A sense of fulfillment that you have done your bit. No? You've done your bit. Result is not in your hands. Result may come down, may come 50 years from now, may come 500 years from now. Take a look at all the brave people. You know, there is a serial on the great people of India. And it never comes in. We are not taught this in history because history was written by the British and they did not want us to be proud of India. So according to them, Indian history is only Mughal history. I didn't know there were so many people who did such heroic acts. Many of them women. Now what did they do? They just did their bit. They didn't get independence for India, but they did their bit and they inspired the next generation. And next generation inspired the next. And so after 200 years, we got independence. But that person, it's so inspiring. There's one man who stood there when the British came to attack them and everybody else fled out of fear except that one man. And the British commander said, shoot. Nobody shot him. So that one Britisher decided to shoot him. With bullets in his body till his body gave up the last source of energy within him, he stood there. So when you hear stories like this, you feel encouraged, you feel inspired. You don't have to give your life. Just do your bit. and forget about the result. It may come now, it may come later. Like we are dedicated to spreading the knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita, of this most enriching knowledge, the wisdom. How many people are coming? What impact is it having? May not have. What does it matter? We are doing our bit. You do your bit. Huh? To the extent you have benefited from this knowledge, it becomes your bounden duty to help spread it. I'm not saying go and talk to millions of people. Whoever is within your scope of influence. Talk to your children, talk to your employees, talk to whoever. Not necessarily talk about the Gita, but just this basic. Do your bit, forget about the result. Tell a student that. So, with this conviction, you must perform action to get to realization. Not because you want to become a billionaire. Not because you want fame, name. Why? Because they all come to go. I just heard of a gentleman, very fine person, elderly person, so he got scammed. On these online transactions, somebody called him, I don't know what happened. And he lost crores. But he led a life, such a simple life, that I didn't even know he had crores. Okay? He used to travel by BST bus. He was invited somewhere for dinner. You got to believe this. And they gave him, they asked him, what is your favorite? What would you like to eat? And he said, Kadi chawal. And they gave him papad. So he enjoyed the papad so much. And he told his hosts, oh, I really enjoyed this papad. I like papad so much, but I've stopped eating it because it's expensive. I said, what? Papad is expensive. And this gentleman had crores. It's not as if he was a beggar. Then he died. Okay? Now, he had crores. He lost them. So he didn't use them as long as he had. He didn't pass it on to the next generation because he lost. And then he died. Obviously, he can't take his crores. What use is all this money? And the whole world is running after money. Huh? Not just running after money. You give up relationships because of money. You give up your peace of mind for money. You give up your happiness for money. And you think you've made it in life? Suppose you had an export house and 100% of your exports were to the US. What would be your condition now? You get a heart attack. Huh? Sit. Therefore, just do your bit. And don't worry about the result. You're an athlete. Whether you win the Olympic gold or not is not in your hands. Whether you're selected to go or not depends on some government official who doesn't understand sport. And even if you're selected to go, whether you win or not depends not only on your performance, it depends on how other people perform, your competitors. But nobody can take away the fact that you are an outstanding sports person, if you are one. Just focus there. And often people applaud not only for the winner. People applaud for the person who has worked really hard and may have lost. But they are the heroes. So, this is what the Bhagavad Gita says. Why must you act? To get to realization, to get to the knowledge that you are Atman, to get to that moksha. You're not interested in anything in the world. And then you are powerful. Nobody can buy you, nobody can bribe you, nobody has control over you. So that's what it is. Verse 16.
किं कर्म किमकर्मेति कवयोऽप्यत्र मोहिताः तत्ते कर्म प्रवक्ष्यामि यज्ञात्वा मोक्षसे शुभात्.
Sages are also deluded about what action is and what is inaction. I will therefore tell you what action is, knowing which you will be freed from evil. Evil means anything that agitates your mind. What agitates your mind? Correct. Desire. So, this verse can be viewed from the relative viewpoint and from the absolute. So, from the relative, which is easier to understand, karma means desire-driven activities, which all of us are familiar with. You have a desire to eat, you go to a restaurant, you have a desire to earn money, you go and work, you have a desire to, I don't know, go enjoy places, you go to Luxembourg, you go to, I don't know, Timbuktu, all these places. So, desire. Now, as long as the desire is not fulfilled, your mind will be agitated. Can't help that. So, karma is desire-driven activity. Akarma is selfless actions dedicated to getting to realization. And in the absolute sense, all actions are karma. And inaction, akarma, is Atman. Right? No? Desire, so okay. In the relative, all desire-driven activities are karma. That you understand? Selfless action is akarma. What is selfless? Desire for liberation. So with reference to the world, you have no desires. You only have desire for God. Now, because God, realization, enlightenment is beyond the world, it is a karma, no desire. With reference to the world, no desire. Okay? That's relative. In the absolute, all actions are karma, and Atman alone is a karma. That is easy to understand. Now, this desire for liberation is very difficult to explain to a person. You know, there is a case of a young girl who who was a sports person, and she was a coach, badminton coach. So coaches earn money by training. So apart from doing that, she would coach underprivileged kids. So the boss of her company came and said, "Why are you wasting your energy coaching underprivileged kids? What do you get? You must coach for money, take a fee." So she told him, he asked her, "Why are you doing that?" She said, "This is one thing I can't explain. I can't explain the rewards of doing actions for free. How can I explain to you?" So he says, "Fine, I'll come with you." And he goes with her, and actually sees what happens when she teaches underprivileged kids. The twinkle in their eyes, their enthusiasm, their excitement, their gratitude to her for showing them the way out of their misery. This you can't put in words. You've got to see for yourself. Then that boss tells her, now I understand. From next Sunday, I will also join you and coach the underprivileged. Similarly, desire for moksha, for liberation, for realization. Why are you coming here every Wednesday? How can you explain that to your family members? You can't. Because they will never understand. They don't have it in them. Or friends or anybody. You know, when I took to this field, all my friends thought I was absolutely mad. They used to tell me, so far you were sensible, now suddenly you've gone off, you've turned mad. Now, I met my boss, my last boss, recently at the airport going to London. And he told me, he said, I told you you were mad. I'm not so sure who's mad, you or me. But now he's past 80, it's too late. After you're 80 years old, what can you do? So that is it, you can't explain. But what joy it gives you, just the pursuit. Like this morning I woke up at 3:45 and from 4 onwards till about 6:30 I was with these ideas. How can I explain the joy in those 2 hours? If I can't do that, it's not worth living. Because that is what sustains me through the day. And that is true of anyone. So, there must be something beyond the world that motivates you. Otherwise, it's not worth living. And to work for money is the most stupid thing anyone can do. I'm not saying you should not have money, but to work only to make money. You understand what I'm saying? Next verse.
कर्मणो ह्यपि बोद्धव्यं बोद्धव्यं च विकर्मणः अकर्मणश्च बोद्धव्यं गहना कर्मणो गतिः.
See, this is what I mean. It's subtle action. 4th chapter talks about the subtlety. Indeed, action should be known. Karma should be known. Vikarma, forbidden action should be known. What is vikarma? And akarma also should be known. Why should all this be known? Because the nature of action is very deep, is incomprehensible. When you go back, trace action back to its root, where does it lead you? You don't know. So, what is karma according to the Bhagavad Gita is obligatory duty. Krishna, the Bhagavad Gita cannot come down to our level, which is desire-driven activity. So when they say karma, they mean obligatory. Obligatory action is of 2 kinds. Niyatam karma, which is regular, daily, routine obligations. Like you have to do certain things for the family members, you have to earn a living, you have to look after your children, so on and so forth, that everybody knows. Then there is a naimittika karma, means special occasional duties which certain circumstances impose on you. Like, I remember this very clearly. You know, when the bomb blast took place on the local trains in Mumbai, that was what, 25 years back? Okay. That evening, I was in Bandra, we were in Bandra at a class like this. In the middle of the class, somebody came in and said, I'm sorry to disturb you, but something terrible has happened. Bombs have gone off in trains, and there's chaos everywhere. Now, I had to come back here to Churchgate. No way. The roads were blocked, everything is blocked. So, some kind lady in Bandra offered to put us up in her house. That is a naimittika karma. You understand? It is not her normal duty to make me stay in her house, to provide hospitality to me and us. There were 3 of us. But that was a special circumstance. Then our driver, she had said, your driver can also stay here and I'll make arrangements for him. But he said the mobile phones are not working. I can't communicate to my wife. She'll think I've died in the train. So I must go home. And he went. The next day he came to work. I asked him, what time did you, I was worried about him. I said, well, how was your journey back home? He's telling me, Mem Saab, kya अच्छे लोग थे. At every step, he walked back home because there was no other way. He said people would come out of their homes, offer tea, batata vada, samosa, dinner. Everything was offered by people who just happened to live there. So that becomes their naimittika karma. You understand? It's a special duty that is imposed on you by circumstance. Same thing, 9/11 happened in New York. So many people came out and helped. So there are 2 kinds of obligations. Nitya karma, regular routine duties. Naimittika karma, special occasional duties. So both these together form karma. Vikarma, forbidden action. Forbidden action can again be interpreted in 2 ways. One is commandments given by the scriptures. Some scriptures give, Bhagavad Gita doesn't give. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not do this, 10 commandments. Right? Commandments are meant for people who don't have the capacity to think for themselves. So they need to be told. You need to tell a human being that you should not kill. That's a basic thing. Whereas the Bhagavad Gita says, anything your conscience does not allow, anything that your conscience revolts against is vikarma, don't do it. So it's highly individualistic. What is vikarma for you may not be vikarma for me, or vice versa. Okay? So I am vegetarian. To me, eating meat is vikarma, forbidden. I have a very good reason for not eating meat, not because I was born a vegetarian. But for a non-vegetarian person, if his conscience does not revolt against it, his conscience thinks it's perfectly okay to eat meat. For him, it is not vikarma. You get it? So many people ask me, does the Bhagavad Gita specifically say you must be vegetarian? No. That is not the job of the Bhagavad Gita. It's for you to decide what is karma and what is vikarma for you. Right? Akarma is Atma, the spirit that enables all activities, the life-giving force. That is the root cause of all action, but itself inactive. It's like fuel, petrol in a car. Without petrol, the car cannot move. But petrol itself does not move. Isn't it? Thank God for that. It enables all movement of cars, itself non-moving, inactive. So, now what happens is, why he is talking about obligatory duty is very important, because that breaks the cycle that we are all caught in. What is this cycle? Why are you performing action? Whatever it is that you do. Let's say one person plays golf, another person goes to the movies, third person plays the sitar, whatever. Huh? Why do you go play golf? Because you have a desire for it. How did the desire come in your mind? How did the desire take shape? Thought. At some point you thought of golf and then these thoughts came together to form a thick stream of thoughts. That is desire. How come the thought of golf came to your mind and not to anybody else's mind? Because you have a vasana for golf. What is vasana? An innate, deep-rooted tendency, inkling, interest in a particular thing which you're born with, or during your lifetime you cultivate. Like for instance, a golf or cricket or something, you may be born with that interest, or dance, or music. But vasana for, what is that thing called? Mahjong. You're not born with that desire, vasana. Huh? How do you cultivate it? Because you thought about it. So one of the two reasons. Now, this is a cycle. And when you perform an action driven by desire, you add, it's like a car running in the monsoon and it splashes the mud back on your car. That's why you have, what is it called? Mud guard. So your personality's mud guard is obligatory action. It prevents the muck of vasanas from coming back to you. Because if you perform desire-driven activity, it boomerangs back on you as more vasana for that particular thing. So you're caught in this. Vasana, thought, desire, action, again vasana. And this goes on all your life, life after life, for janmas together. You want to break that cycle, you have to perform obligatory duty, which has no connection with desire. You understand that? Huh? Like, you have an obligation to take care of your parents. You may not have a desire for it. You have an obligation to support national interests. You may not want to, you may not have a desire to, but it is your obligation. Huh? Like for instance, when all this tamasha is taking place, what are they called? Indian Americans, right? People of Indian origin in America, they are the richest community. But they have no power because nobody is interested. You take the Jews, if America were to impose tariffs on Israel, you think they'll keep quiet? They wouldn't dare do that. Because the Jews are a very strong lobby. They dictate American policy. Indians have so much wealth, so much money, and there are how many million? It's a sizable number of Indians. Nothing. Not even a squeak out of them. Not one Indian has stood up and said anything to support the country. Don't you think that's... Anyway, I have nothing to say about it. Similarly, now us, okay? Suppose every Indian, the whole country, were to take the stand, boycott American goods. I will not buy a single American, no McDonald's, no KFC, No, none of these. What do you think will happen to the United States? Because ours is a great, huge market. But we don't, that is our obligation. To uphold national interest is our obligation. We are not concerned. You know why they are not concerned? Tamas of the highest order. Tamas means indifference. I don't care a damn, that attitude. And tamasic people, till they get hit on their own head, they will not budge. So, this is the importance of karma, obligation. You have to understand what your obligations are. You understand basics, you understand. I have to take care of my children, get them married, spend crores on my daughter's wedding, and after that go broke. This is our concept of obligation. No, the obligations goes beyond it. And to the extent you uphold your obligation, life becomes exciting. Because then you opt out of this loop of desire which traps you. As long as you have desire, you're trapped. Break free from that. And then you overcome the most daunting challenges. Like Rahul Dravid apparently continued to bat in spite of having a fractured foot or wrist or something like that. Imagine continuing to play. And they asked him, why did you play? He said, I thought of the boys back there. So many people have done so many things. And here, what do? We are like that Sound of Music girl, little girl, who says, I can't sing. Why? Because she is heartbroken that her father is going to marry some lady that they don't like, the children. So, because my thumb's sore. So cute. But we are like that. I can't come to work today. Why? I have a headache. Arey? Headache, you don't come. You remain there all your life. See, it's not that your organization will suffer. It's your concept. I have acidity, I will not come. My toes hurting, I will not come. You know, on Anant Chaturdashi day, the 10th day, people sit at home because they're afraid that they'll get caught in traffic. You know what the truth is? Once I went from Churchgate, where I live, to Malabar Hill. I got there in 10 minutes flat. Go do your work. See, don't take it literally. I'm not saying be reckless about it. But don't be afraid. It's the same thing okay, you're inconvenienced. I grant that. Somebody goes on a morcha and their mission is to upset the working in Mumbai. You have to defeat them. How? Go to work. They are jobless. They want you not to work. What kind of attitude is that? Same thing they did in Delhi. And you sit there and someone pays you to just sit there. This is tamas. So when you are aware of things and say, I will defeat that. I will do my bit to defeat. So you go out, you do what you have to do. Nothing will happen. We are all just too afraid. Little bit rain comes, the streets are flooded, I will not come to work. You know, when I was in school, my school, they had a record. They did not declare a holiday irrespective of how much rain there was. Because their attitude was, if you can come, you come. If you can't come, sit at home. But at least those who come will come and they will be taught. Fantastic attitude. We learned that. Now, New York is even worse. Half an inch rain, the whole city comes to an end, a halt. That is the value of karma. And when you're dedicated and it's a mission for you, you don't allow anything to come in the way. That's the thing. Next verse. Yeah. You say. We allow gentlemen first.
Thanks for calling me. Going back to the one action, you only mentioned that you should perform only on the ATMs to break the rule. Now, I'm not about so many desires at any point in time. For example, watching cricket, IPL, it's a desire that we already cultivated. How do I then break out from that cycle to more matches to see more? You get excited about it.
Good question. See, what he's asking is, if you say perform only obligation, then my life becomes boring because I can't fulfill my desires. And I have a desire, innocuous desire to watch cricket maybe, to watch the US Open, to, I don't know, whatever, football match. How do you do? So, Vedanta, the Bhagavad Gita does not say that you should not fulfill desires. It simply says, shift your focus to obligatory action. And while your obligations are going on, it may be possible to fulfill so many desires. In fact, you know what happens? Your desires get fulfilled without your trying to. I've actually experienced that. I went to Toronto for lectures. I was such an idiot. I did not know that Niagara Falls is so close to Toronto. So, when did I come to know? When the plane was about to land, the pilot announced that those who are sitting on the left can see the Niagara Falls. And he said something about, I'm sure you will be visiting Niagara Falls. And then the thought passed, because I was going only for lectures, I had no time to go to Niagara because it's quite a drive. And then a friend came and said, is this your first visit to Toronto? I said, yes. Have you been to the Niagara? I said, no. He said, you can't come to Toronto and not go to Niagara. You must. I'll take you. So he was a Canadian, such a wonderful person. He and his mother-in-law, elderly lady, took us to Niagara. I still remember that. This was like 30 years ago. So that desire, it wasn't even a desire. I had no desire to go to Niagara. But it got fulfilled without my planning, executing, scheduling, nothing. So that's what happens. When you work for the higher, that is what verse 10 of chapter 3 says. It will be the Kamadhenu of all your endeavors. Remember, Kamadhenu means that with the cow that fulfills all your desires. The amazing thing is, you work for a higher ideal, you just stick to your duties. You're not even thinking beyond. And your desires get fulfilled. And consciously also you can fulfill desires. One Sunday you're sitting there, you have the time, watch. You have the money, go to Wimbledon also. But the main focus of your attention should be obligation. Next verse. Sorry.
During the current we talked about conscience. Is it conscience collective? Like, isn't it same? For example, if I hurt someone, anybody hurt someone, they do feel that pinch. So magnitude may vary, but then we discussed that it's individual conscience. So what is right for me may not be right for them.
Yeah, see, she's asking a question about conscience because we said it's individual. So she's asking, isn't it collective that everyone's conscience will say you should not hurt people? The fact of the matter is, it is true that everybody's conscience points towards the higher. In other words, nobody's conscience will say, yes, go kill. But the extent of awakening of your conscience is different depending on how many desires you have. So your desires shroud your conscience. That's why I gave the example of meat eating. So is it wrong to eat meat? No, it depends on your conscience. Now you're saying everybody's conscience says you should not kill. But there are people who genuinely believe that animals were created only for me to eat. So now you can't say you're wrong. You know? But what I would say is a lot of non-vegetarians would not eat if they saw what exactly happened to animals. You don't see, so you just pick up from the store and cook it and eat it. You don't connect it with the animal or the torture that the animal goes through. That's a different matter. But lots of things your conscience may agree to, my conscience may revolt against. So who's right, who's wrong? To thine own self be true, and it must follow as night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man, said Shakespeare. Bhagavad Gita says exactly the same thing. Follow your conscience. That is the absolute indicator of right and wrong. It's like the mariner's compass, it will always point north. And there were earlier times, they used only the mariner's compass to go from place to place, ships. And they got to their destination. So all you have to do is follow your conscience, you'll get to your destination. Somebody else may not agree with that. So what? Let them lead their life. Their conscience performs or rather functions according to their experiences, their desires, their nature.
कर्मण्यकर्मया पश्येत् अकर्मणि च कर्मयः स बुद्धिमान् मनुष्येषु स युक्तः कृत्स्नकर्मकृत्.
Every verse in this chapter is classic, beautiful. One who sees inaction in action and action in inaction. Saha buddhiman manusheshu. That person is wise among human beings. What a statement. Not a PhD, not a lawyer, not a doctor, not a chartered accountant. Then who? Just one who understands, who sees action in inaction. And we'll shortly see what that is. He is buddhiman, wise among human beings. Such a one is a yogi, united person. Kritsna karma krit. He is the doer of all actions. He is the person who drives humanity, who sets the pace for human beings. He is a leader, in other words. So, with this verse, we begin the third topic of this chapter. Actions do not bind the enlightened. So now, he's talking about objectivity, that sakshi bhav, objectivity, sakshi bhav, witness attitude. Just as you see an actor in various roles, see a director or a producer of films, movies, sees an actor, He just doesn't just stay there. He says, he'll be good in this role, this role, this role. So he sees the actor playing various roles. And when he sees a role, a script, he says, this actor will be perfect for me. You see that? Like that, a person who understands the totality sees action in inaction. Inaction means Atman. So wherever he sees Atman, he sees the potential for so much of activity. And where he sees action, he understands Atman is the motivating factor in that person. Just as an electrician sees when he goes to the main, what is it called? Where electricity is generated, power is generated, goes to Tata Power in Khandala. They have Kapoli. You don't see much, there's nothing much to see there. But an electrical engineer sees, oh my God, this is the power that it generates. So many factories can come alive. So many cities it can empower. And when he sees the manifestation of electricity, he understands there's power behind it. Such a person sees the totality. Now we don't know what Atman is, we have no inkling, we have no suspicion that there is anything beyond. So we are all grappling in ignorance. So we see action, we get involved in it, we get attached to it, we die in that. Another action. So in other words, we get involved with the role, we forget the actor. So there is no objectivity in anything that we do, there's complete involvement. Such a person who sees, is yukta. Yukta means united. Wherever he goes, he sees Atman. So ultimately he merges with Atman. It's like the river becomes the ocean. The wave understands, even while the wave is there, I am not just the wave, I am that mighty ocean. So even when you're a human being, you're limited. There's only so much you can run. Your physical abilities are limited. Emotional highs can only take you so much to such heights. Intellectually, you can only do so much. So there's severe limitations, you see, as a human being. But while you are in the body, mind and intellect, if you understand I am Atman, my God, everything breaks down. All the limitations break down. Pat, 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 it goes. It's like Gulliver's Travels. You know Gulliver's Travels? Gulliver gets washed onto ashore and he's fast asleep. So the Lilliputians come and painstakingly nail him to the ground. It takes them so much effort. And they think they've nailed him. But what is the truth? The truth is he's asleep. Similarly, friends, you and I are like that Gulliver who's just asleep. And therefore we get nailed by what is happening in the world. No Trump can nail Atman. Please understand that. He doesn't have the power. No relationship, no person that... You see, in relationships you get attached. Then you get enslaved by that person. I've seen people, I travel a lot, so I stay in people's homes. There are couples where the husband has to repeat the wife's name every minute. Suppose the wife's name is Anita. You are talking to him about something else altogether, and he'll say, isn't that true, Anita? 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 You get fed up. of just hearing a little. And there are mothers who repeat the child's name all the time. If the child's name is Anand, Anand this, Anand that, Anand that. This is enslavement. This is complete and total imprisonment, mental imprisonment. You can't think beyond the spouse. You can't think beyond the child. That you break free from. And that is such a relief. Like Wordsworth says, you breathe ethereal air. This doesn't mean you break the relationship. Please don't misunderstand. The relationship continues. It becomes a wonderful interaction. The only thing that happens is you are no longer a slave to that person. I've seen children who they call the shots. They decide everything in the house. What lunch to have, mother will say, Beta, what would you like to have for lunch? Arey? When we were kids, we were not asked. Food would be cooked. If you liked it, good for you. If you didn't like it, you had the choice of not eating or gulping it. Huh? That's the thing. So, you become a yukta, united, and kritsna karma krit. You perform potent, powerful actions which go down in history. You go down in history as a powerful person because you have that clarity of thought. You have a higher vision. You're working not just for yourself, you're working for the well-being of the whole world. Sarve bhavantu sukhina. Let everyone be happy. And not just for the world now, for future generations. Krishna, Rama, these are two characters that have shaped India's history, civilization, culture, the thought that flits through every mind has been determined by the Ramayana and the Krishna avatar. We don't have, what is that? Godfather as our hero. You understand what Godfather is, no? The movie, the mafia boss. We don't have such heroes. We don't look up to such people. We look up to Rama and Krishna. And that is what shaped our culture. We should bring these values back into our lives. Today's children think it's old-fashioned. It can never be old-fashioned. These values can never be old-fashioned. They're ever young. Because they lead to this potency of action. Saha buddhiman. Only that person is wise. That means the rest of us are utter fools. Because we don't understand this. Work without this sense of doership. You know what doership is? I am the doer. I do everything. Without me, what will happen to the family? You know, there was a family here at Malabar Hill. And the couple had 2 sons. They were extremely naughty. And every morning when they had to get ready to go to school, there would be pandemonium in the house. Because one boy would go from one place to the other, where are my socks? The other guy would say, I can't find my shoes. And this would go on. And somehow or the other, they managed to get both the children to the school bus stop in time. It was a Gujarati family. So the lady of the house, she was from Ahmedabad. One day said, I have to go to my mother's house for a week. And then she told me, I don't know what has happened, what is going to happen to these rascals, the sons. My husband doesn't do anything, he only reads the newspaper in the morning. So I said, don't worry, what is the worst that will happen? They won't go to school 5 days. You go enjoy yourself. And she went. Midweek, Wednesday, I was curious. So I said, let's me go in the morning and see what's happening in their house. So I went there. The school bus came at 7:30. I went at 7:15 because I used to go for a morning walk. Complete silence. All bedroom doors shut. No activity anywhere. So I said, my God, these rascals are sleeping. And suddenly, at 7:25, both the boys came out of their rooms immaculately dressed with their tie in place, shoes, socks, everything. Properly dressed. Said, Papa, boy, bye, we're going to school. Off they went. I said, this is a miracle. Next week, lady comes back. Same chaos. Huh? So you know what it is? It is just attachment. And she would be heartbroken if she came to know that everything in the house went like clockwork in her absence. In other words, when she wasn't there, everything was perfect. She came back, again chaos. So on what basis do you think you are the doer? On what basis do you think that you determine everything that goes on in the world? That's ego. It's a false sense of doership. Thank you.